measure of decisiveness provides to my chagrin only the need to ask again. Clench my teeth as I
Is brought to you by StrongHeartAcademy.com, where no heart is no victory. Second thing that we're brought to you by is BJJ2go.com. And the third one is Rat Bat. When you have to remove rats, get a bat. Rat Bat. Cool. I think it is working. So I guess we'll find out afterwards if we can hear next door dancing Zumba. And the beat is so fast. Like I said, like you said, like you want to get up and just start dancing in the middle. Like this is like Telemundo news. You're on TV Telemundos. Have you ever watched the daytime? I used to love to watch them actually. They would just start dancing in the middle of like they'd be on a couch like this, and there's like a serious interviewer, and then we'd saying something serious, and then all of a sudden music would come on, and they all just go, oh.
They just get up and start
dancing. Sometimes I feel that because the Zumba music next door, they're just dancing their booties off. But
it's funny.
Anyway, I just wanted to invite you on my podcast because you let me talk on yours, and I found there's two things actually. I really liked your book, probably because it enforces my biases to beliefs that I already think I had for a long time in Christianity. But
which are
that people, maybe I'm taking the interpretation of the book wrong, but people project what they want on Jesus.
That's true.
Versus like what he is.
Yep.
Or was and is.
Yep.
And the whole book is basically, I felt like pointing that out. Not hypocrisy. I don't think it's hypocrisy, but it's pointing out like the biggest one for me was always patriotism and putting patriotism into Christianity.
Yep.
And I think that's dangerous for humanity.
Yep.
And groupthink. Yep. And then forcing groupthink into Jesus, and that was not Jesus. So much of Jesus is so inclusive, for humanity, I would say. But he also had strict lines of ethics and morality, and like this is what it is.
Right.
And then people kind of, I feel, morph things into what they want it to be, and a lot of Christians, I probably even myself pick and choose what they want to believe.
Right.
In the Bible, even the harsh things, you're like, well, I don't know, it's there.
Yep.
So I really enjoyed reading the book.
I'm grateful.
And it's easy. It's not a hard read.
Right.
And I've been reading more Christian books lately, and sometimes I find them dry, and I always wonder, like, what more can be said, which is 2,000 years past, and we're in many, many, many books, and every year more people writing books.
Lots of ink.
So what can you say new about this, these books actually put together? And but I thought it was a good, important thing that needed to be that should be addressed, that is never addressed. And it's not like a new thing. Politics have been doing it forever,
right?
And not just United States.
Right.
It's not like a regional thing.
Right.
It's a everything thing. There's a movie once. What was it called? 21 Jump Street, and they had this scene in it with Korean Jesus. They were in a Korean church, and they had the Korean Jesus on the thing, and you want to see the symbol of yourself, in Jesus, and I totally get it, even though he was a Middle Eastern man and probably not very tall, and probably did have a beard and probably had long hair. They didn't really cut their hair or have scissors, but he was probably pretty tan, and I don't know if he had shredded abs either, and the whole thing, but and I get over time the need to relate someone that was alive 2,000 years ago to maybe someone now, and like seeing yourself in that. I get that. I just don't think it's 100% truthful or honest. Yeah. And we're talking about Christianity, so we should probably be honest as much as you're
capable.
As you can. Yeah.
There's two things on that. I think one is that I affirm the desire for people to identify strongly with Jesus. I think that's really important. So I think that taking a look at his life and taking a look at maybe some of the experiences that he had or the circumstances that he had, I think that's really important for us to kind of try to get into. The danger is that instead of, hey, this might be a way that I'm similar to Jesus, it's more like Jesus is more like me. And so we conform him to me versus me conform to him. And that's dangerous. And I even mentioned this I don't just remember it. I mentioned it in the book, but I've said it in a few different places. But, in Africa, Jesus is black. And it's like, why wouldn't he be? Everybody does this. This is normal. So when you tell these stories, this is how you think about this.
Yep.
And so that part of it, I understand why people do it, and I don't get too bent out of shape. It's when that adaptation becomes something that starts shaping their life in a way that's, well, Jesus is like me, and Jesus would think like me, and Jesus would act like me, and it's like, you got to be really careful around that kind of stuff. So even when it comes to nationalism, patriotism, I mean, I want to move the conversation, and when it becomes nationalism, then I get really concerned.
Yeah.
Because all sorts of atrocities are done in Jesus' name.
For sure. Yeah.
And that kind of stuff is just.
I try not to get in the Facebook arguments with it, but so many times it's this blanket statement is like, religion is so terrible for humanity, and how many wars. I'm like, I try to remind people that Stalin was atheist.
Right.
He killed 50 million people.
Right.
All the big killers were
Right.
all atheists.
Right.
People are just evil.
Right.
Humanity is broken. It's
Right.
not a religion versus non-religion.
Right.
It's neither. It's people suck.
People are really
People
rough,
need Jesus,
man.
and they suck. It's not a, Christian. It does go wrong though.
Yep.
I think when you add nationalism to it, and I was raised Mennonite, and they're very anti symbolism.
Mm-hmm.
They don't. A lot of Catholicism is symbolism of saints or like the cross.
Yep.
I've never worn a cross.
Yep.
And the older I get, the more I think I would be okay with it.
Yeah.
But I just always thought like it's idolism.
Right.
And I'm not for idolism. But again, also understand that humans, they need to have a visual representation sometimes to understand it, instead of just reading the words and internalizing maybe the stances that Jesus had in the teachings, and just learning the teachings versus like having this thing to look at and to understand. But throughout human civilization, we've always had idols,
symbols
and
things,
things like that. I just think it gets dangerous.
Yeah, one thing that I try to remind people is that so much of the early church, people couldn't read.
Yeah.
And so they needed pictures.
Sure.
They always use pictures in order to tell the story. So even medieval period, you'd have the paintings or the pictures and the stained glass around people so that they could see the story, because they couldn't read.
Yeah.
So I affirm the use of symbols to the degree that you're not worshiping the symbol, you're worshiping the one it represents.
No, and I think it's important that the discussion has to be kind of mixed in every once in a while. Like we need to understand the teaching.
Right. What did
lessons,
he say?
the lessons. What are the lessons? What are we gleaning from this?
Yep.
Even when as a kid, and this is going to bother a lot of people, but pledging allegiance to the flag was always an issue for me as a kid, and even to this day. But I love the United States, and I think we were like, even to this day, our religious freedoms, people don't understand. Even places like Canada and in Europe, there are restrictions.
Yep.
We have zero restrictions on our religious freedoms. And I think that is one of the greatest things that the Founding Fathers did in the United States. But I don't like pledging it to a symbol of a flag. I rather pledge it to the Constitution, which is one of the greatest documents ever made, ever.
Right.
And that's like my patriotism is like the Constitution.
Right.
It's
pretty
awesome.
amazing. Yeah.
these guys were so far thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And my family, my dad's family, they were Mennonites. They came here in 1778, and the Mennonites came here because of persecution in Europe because of the Catholics. So like even that, the history of that for me is important, that the United States, you know, took people and said, hey, you're being persecuted for your beliefs, you know, come here, pray how you want to pray.
Right.
And I find it dangerous when we want to push one type of Christianity over another Christianity, and saying that this is the right one versus the wrong one in a government space.
Right.
I think it's fine to have debates on theological debates with different denominations.
Right.
This is good, healthy talk. I'm saying when a government pushes one, you know, like the English Church or like the Catholicism basically ran all of Europe, large amounts of the world, and saying that this is the only one, and basically murdering people that didn't believe that way. That's when it gets super dangerous.
Right.
And I think, you know, the founding fathers were so smart to say, you know, maybe some religions that we don't believe in or have a problem with, we have to include them so that we all can have freedom, as long as they're not breaking other laws, you know, in our society, in their way that they pray, or in the way that they worship, whatever that they're worshiping.
Well, the founding fathers would have never had a concept of all of the different religions that we look at today, because of the way that populations have moved. So when they're writing the documents in the 1700s, they're using the French Revolution and Enlightenment. You know, there wasn't the movement of people in the same way that we have it today. And the thing that's great about the Constitution is that even though they wouldn't have been able to conceive of what we have today in terms of movement of people and that kind of thing, the document still allows for freedom of expression. And they wrote it in a way that was really helpful, you know, and I'm really grateful for that. As a matter of fact, I don't know if I told you this, but we were in Washington D.C. a few years ago, and our Constitution, Bill of Rights, other things are predicated on what's called the Magna Carta. I don't know if you're familiar with the Magna Carta, but in 1215, it's the first time a king gave up authority to people, his subjects. And so much of our rights are predicated on the Magna Carta. And so I go back all the way to 1215. I say, here they are in Runnymede in England, and they're signing this document, and they're saying, okay, here's some inalienable rights that people have. Very different than our documents today, but that was the course. So we're back in England, in DC, right, in England, and so we're back in DC, and we were. But
they were worried at that time of revolutions.
No, so this is 1200. So what was happening was the kings were taxing the princes, and they were trying to get money for wars and that kind of thing, and the princes were like, you don't get to tax us anymore. So the idea of taxation without representation actually has its roots.
Yeah, but they were worried that they might break, the princes and the nobles would break off.
Or what they would...
I mean, you have to... They're trying to get money, but they also don't want a breakup.
Right. Well, you know, or to have them...
You have to have negotiations at that point, because they're just almost as powerful if they collectively get together.
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they have
That's what I meant by that. Like,
yeah, sorry, yeah.
They had to make...
They had him over the barrel.
Yeah, and it happened in Russia too. Previously, they were trying to give nobles, you know, serfs were still serfs, but the nobles started to get more power than, or just as much as the king, because they were having so many riots before the communist revolution. They had many riots in Russia, and they had to give a little bit, just, you know, just a little bit. I'm not gonna give you a lot of rights, but we're gonna give you a little bit of rights. Anyway,
well, but it's fascinating because the way that we've been formed has been shaped through especially English history, but all the way back, you know, to the 1200s.
That's a long time ago.
Oh, it's a long time ago. So when I was in DC, was in the National Archives with my kids. were walking around and checking out stuff, and I came around the corner, and they had a copy of the 1254 Magna Carta.
Oh, wow.
And I just had a freak out. I mean, I just lost it. I was like, no way. And I sort of kind of ran out of that. I was like, are you serious? And my kids had studied a little bit of Latin, so I was like, come over here and read this.
I was like, I would not be able to read it.
Well, I couldn't read it, but I was like, this is incredible. There's so much here. So when I think about our religious liberties, I go, it's a protracted thing for me. It's like this really long chain of decision making and all of those things. And so kind of full circle, when people say, more people have been killed in the name of religion and blah blah blah, I become indignant. So I don't get in the Facebook fight. I just I ask.
No, I don't get in it.
Well, but I want
see it
to.
And I get all fired up.
I know
like,
I want to. I just say
I'm not going to accomplish anything.
Here's my one line mic drop when that happens, and I try not to get baited, right? But if I get baited, I just say, name one human institution that has fed more orphans and cared for more widows than the church.
Yeah.
Silence.
For sure.
So obviously the history of the 1900s. With Mao and just name it, there's hundreds of millions of people who have been killed, right?
Yeah.
And so when you want to put all of the evil at the world at the church, I say, you can put it at the feet of humanity.
Yeah.
Which kind of brings us back to this idea that people are in need of being loved really, really well, because without that, then we go astray in ways that are really, really ugly.
Where can you get this book? You just gave me it, and I tried to pay you, and you were like, no, I'm just going to give it to you.
Yeah, it's Amazon.
How can people pay you? Okay, they can pay you on Amazon.
You just go to Amazon and buy it. I don't get a nickel from the book, so it's really good. Yeah, it's really helpful.
But it's a good book.
I'm grateful.
People should get. I mean,
yeah, it's fun.
You should read it. I just bought a measure. What is the Measure of a Man by Martin Luther King.
Okay.
So that's my next big read. It's
nice.
a tiny book. It's he gave 2 sermons at some college, and I just wanted to read them.
Yeah.
What was the last one I did? I can't remember the guy's name now. It's another black guy, but it was such a good book. It was so well written, and it was not small.
Yeah.
But some people, like, you read their words and like, you're just so good at this. Like,
those guys are.
Like you can reduce down to the base level of what you're trying to get across, right? You could just say it in the smallest amount of words, but some people can make it just more weighty and powerful, and it's like, these words are so heavy and so, beautiful.
Yeah.
And is there any like authors that you read, you're like, this guy, and for me, like, whenever I read those people, I want to tell everyone, like, you need to read it. You should read this guy. You should read this person. Right. Is there who would you tell me, Mike, this guy is the amazing writer, and not even just Christianity, but like maybe someone that expresses their thoughts well.
I mean, it goes without saying, C.S. Lewis is always, a remarkable. There's a guy, he wrote a book, little tiny book. It's pretty philosophically dense. His name's Leslie Newbegin.
Okay.
And he wrote extensively about the gospel and culture and that kind of stuff. He was a missionary in South India for about 40 years, and then he came back to the West and just kind of observed the culture and was like, wait. So he wrote a book called The Gospel in a Pluralist Society, which is remarkable. But he wrote a much...
What's a pluralistic society?
A society where there's a lot of different types of people and a lot of different viewpoints that are competing. So not like, there's one dominant, and then, because it used to be that the Judeo-Christian ethic in the West was the dominant worldview. Now it's a pluralist society. So, but then he wrote a little tiny book, and as small as it is, it might be one of the most important books I've read outside of the scriptures.
Really?
Yeah, and it's called Proper Confidence, and it's faith, doubt, and certainty in Christian discipleship. But it's it's lead. I mean, it's heavy. It's really, loaded. Little tiny thin thing, but it comes and gets you. So that book, Proper Confidence, Leslie Newbegin, and it's
Leslie Newbegin.
Lesslie, and then New, Bigin, I believe, is how you spell his name.
Let me see where. This is the book.
Proper Confidence.
Jesus and the Disheartened, and this was written in. Oh, it says 70s. I thought it was older than that. But it's such a good book. And in the beginning of that book, he's black, and he's talking about, I think, in the 30s or 40s, and he goes to India, and an Indian guy, actually a Hindu guy, says, like, how can you believe in Christianity when, like, you're not really very free in your own society, and some people use Christianity as a reason to keep you not free. Yeah. And his explanation was just so good, and he explained the political atmosphere at the time of Christ as well, like being ruled by Romans, and like how everyone was looking for Jesus as a liberator from Roman rule, but in a bloody way. Like he's going to be the king, but he's going to bring basically a bloodbath. And we're gonna revolt. And it was just such a well written book, and in his his explanation of love and Christ's explanation of love and explaining it was so good. And it was like 90 pages. It was so easy to get through.
That's good.
But it was very weighty, like
dense.
And I think it only is like 3 chapters.
Yeah, make sure you share it with me.
I'll show you. I wanted to look it up because I'm like, what is the name of it?
Yeah.
And I never even heard of that guy.
Yeah.
And he was part of the civil rights movement too, but I've just never heard of the guy.
Yeah.
My pastor brought it up once. Sometimes when I'm in church, if my pastor brings up something, I'll start Googling it.
Right.
Because I'm like, okay, well, I don't know. For me to learn things, I have to like, okay, well, who are you talking about? Who's this guy? And and he might say one quote from like, I'm like, wow, that's a good quote.
Right.
I kind of I want to know more about it.
Then you explore.
Yeah, I want to know more. So I'll share that with you.
Yeah. I did want to say, probably the other guy that I read that has shaped me personally, just my own understanding of the scriptures and Jesus and that kind of stuff, is N.T. Wright. Okay. So I quote him in the book, and he is he's wicked smart. He's an academic, but he's been writing to help folks like you and me just say, okay, how can I get there? So he's got books that are this thick, but then he gets stuff out that's this thick, and it's still weighty, but it's really important stuff. So there's a book called Surprised by Hope. There's Scripture and the Authority of God. He's just prolific writer, and basically I try to devour anything he writes, because he helps me. I resonate with what he has to say. He's British, so sometimes I kind of get lost in what he's trying to say a little bit. But
because of the context of what he's saying, or like
the way that he phrases things,
okay,
and the way he says things. Sometimes he'll, and it's not necessarily British. Maybe he's highly academic, and so what I feel like sometimes is there's a long trail to get to where you're trying to get to, and I go, okay, what are you saying? And I get a little bit lost, but. Those two guys are just, I will read,
whatever they put out.
Well, Leslie Newbegin's past, N.T. Wright, I will read, relentlessly. So, Brene Brown on shame. I mean, there's just author after author after author. So
I could catch up to you, man.
Yeah, I just finished Donna Hicks' book on dignity. Fantastic. So, I read a lot, and
It's kind of your job a little bit.
I mean, processing information, I guess, is part of my job. Yeah. What's being said out there? How can I put that in a way that makes sense to people? Yeah.
So, I don't mind thick books. It just, sometimes thick books are fluffed, you know. And
well, they're written to a particular audience.
yeah,
That's what I get. I'm like, you're writing to academics.
yeah,
so
but sometimes academic, it's like
You-
you're just trying to impress another academic versus like getting the knowledge and the viewpoint out. And I'd rather just get the knowledge and the viewpoint out. But some people
yeah,
can use less words to do it, but
Right.
it's still so thought out. Each word is so thought out.
yeah,
Like some people I read, I'm like, that whole sentence, you didn't just say a sentence and write it.
Mhm.
You broke down every word
Mhm.
and the placement in that sentence.
Right.
And you did that line after line after line
Right.
after line. And those people, I'm blown away with the patience also
right.
of doing that, because I'm assuming in my mind that they wrote it, rewrote it, rewrote it.
Mhm.
It was that quite what I wanted, and
Mhm.
and I'm just so impressed when I read that kind of stuff. It's like looking at fine art to
It
me.
is.
It's like, this is impressive.
Yeah, very
what-
carefully
what
done.
you can do. And obviously the more they write, just like any skill, the better you get.
Right.
And I'm sure, like, if I read their essays when they were in college, it wouldn't be as good as this book that they
Sure.
wrote years later. It's funny because it's one of those things that I feel like the older you get, the better you get.
Yeah.
And not a lot of things are like that.
Right.
I mean, we do jiu-jitsu,
Right.
so it's not that way in jiu-jitsu. The older you get, the slower
The
you get.
slower you get.
You might be a little bit craftier, but like
Maybe
you get a little
intentional.
bit slower. But writing is,
Writing you can improve.
as long as your mind is
Yeah.
sharp, it
Yeah.
just gets sharper.
Yeah.
And because of your age, you get more experiences.
Yeah.
So you get to articulate your experiences, and your experiences shape you.
Yep.
So I feel like the older you get, almost, again, the better you are at getting it out.
If you practice,
Unless I guess you put yourself in this like hole and like
yeah,
never get out of your hole of like thought process. But I
Right.
feel like if you're more enlightened, you can use your experiences
Well,
in
it's
your
just-
life to shape your thoughts and hopefully articulate them better.
yeah. Well, and it's just like what you're doing here. I mean, you started a podcast. I said your
I started a podcast because I can't write.
well, but your podcast won't be what it is in 3 years.
Oh yeah,
you
I'd
know,
probably.
and so you'll
yeah.
develop and grow and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm a 2-stripe white belt when it comes to writing, and I have.
Just gotta keep writing more.
So that's the whole point.
So
Yeah,
next
just gotta
book.
keep writing. Yeah,
Gotta
keep
get the
writing, keep blogging, keep writing. Trying to think critically about issues.
Yeah,
and
you
things,
know,
so.
I read your article on, and I saw 2 other articles about it on some. I don't follow any Christian music,
Mhm.
really, unfortunately. I don't like a lot of it,
Mhm.
which makes me sad, actually. I've talked to my pastor about it, too. I'm like, it makes me sad that I hate this music.
Mm.
Like, I feel like you're supposed to worship God, and I'm not good at that
Yeah.
at all. And but anyway, you wrote an article about some people falling from faith
Right.
that were that are lionized or like almost idolized
Mm-hmm.
because they're on a stage. And this is common in anyone on a stage.
Right.
You put more importance to them because they're in front of more people.
Yeah.
It doesn't always mean that they are deserving of that weight,
That's right.
of that
Yeah.
admiration, and I read some other, I think it was a guy from Skillet.
Yep.
And he wrote an article. It was like a really good article, actually. I thought he wrote really pretty well too.
Mm-hmm.
That sometimes they're young and sometimes this and that. But I really liked yours. It was a good article. So I
Yeah,
think
thanks.
you're good at writing.
I'm
man.
trying. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I'm trying. Yeah, I actually linked the Skillet article to my to the blog post that I used, and the point that I was trying to make is that it happens in Christian circles a lot. I think it happens elsewhere, but I primarily see it in Christian circles, is that we mistake talent for character, and anytime you do that, you're in trouble. So just because somebody's really good at something doesn't make them a good person, or it doesn't make them a fully orbed person. So we get shocked when somebody who is super talented, suddenly, acts in a way that we're, it's like, oh, how could they do that? Well, my character's not fully formed either.
Yeah.
But just because they're good at that doesn't make them, a leader.
Yeah.
Or worthy of kind of all of the adulation. And I think the people with the most character tend to shy away from that kind of stuff anyways, you know. Yeah, I get really uncomfortable when people make a big deal out of other people, because one of my points in that article was to say we're just seeing them at a time and place, like just a glimpse, just a snapshot of what their life is like, and I don't want to judge them based on, you know, one photo in a photo album.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is when they said this. Well, that doesn't mean that they're going to hold that belief or think that way the rest of their life. So if it changes, it changes. And is it a bummer or something? It can be, but it doesn't shake who I am or how I think. So that was kind of part of the thing there, because people get weird, man. They, you know, how could this possibly happen? Well,
they're humans.
Human beings, right? Yeah.
They're humans. I was working out with my friend yesterday, and I was telling him how, like, it's pretty common, you know, that pastors, they end up, you know, ruining their marriages, and they, you know, cheat on their wives.
Mm-hmm.
And I was explaining my point of view of why this happens.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a musician, and he used to get on stage, and I'm like, I bet you when you were young, like, you had a lot of women that adored you, and it's because you're on a stage. Yeah. And it's just part of nature, whatever you want to call it, but
Mm-hmm.
it's attractive to women.
Mm-hmm.
Like, being on a stage is attractive to women.
Mm-hmm.
Comedians do it, actors do it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just part of, again, it's just part of nature. And if a pastor, you know, doesn't have a good home life, and he's not taking care of his wife, and they don't have a good relationship,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's a lot of temptation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird, because sometimes it seems like sometimes ladies don't even know that what's going on. Like, they
Mm-hmm.
don't know that the feelings, or why that the feelings are happening,
Mm-hmm.
and then controlling that sin, or where is it coming from. But it's a very strange phenomenon that happens a lot. I used to work in we did church funds to build churches. It was my only office job I ever had, and I hated it. But we took.
I can't picture you in an office.
Oh my goodness, it was so terrible. I would stare at the wall, out the window a lot, and then they took away my window, and I was like, oh, I don't have a window. And then I was in a basement for a while.
Oh my goodness.
So it was
out.
so crushing. It was so crushing. But we did fund bonds, raise bonds to build churches.
Mm-hmm.
And we had all these southern churches, and I was telling them, all these southern churches, we would have all these issues,
Mm-hmm.
because so many of them would be this church, they're expanding this church, and then the pastor would cheat on their wife, and then everyone in the congregation found out, and then they blow, and then it just, all of it just disintegrates.
Yep.
You know. And I was like, it was so more common than you would think.
Yeah.
You know, and it would screw us up, because it was like, the business is done,
Right.
over. And then I don't even know how we had a whole legal department. I don't even know how I was a nobody 19-year-old. I don't know what was going on, but
Yeah.
I remember it stuck in my mind a lot, like, because we would see it every day.
Yeah.
and it was always, I don't know what it is with southern ones, but it was like a lot of southern churches, all these
Mm-hmm.
southern churches in, like, basically the Bible Belt.
Yep.
You know.
Yep.
And I just always felt bad, like, that sometimes that's a representation also of, like, Christianity.
It
and
is.
People go, oh, you know, hypocrites. I'm like, yeah,
we are.
that's a
Well,
hypocrite.
the church,
Sure.
the church is no different than the society.
Yeah.
So the church
People.
is made up of people from the society.
Mm-hmm.
So I think about, you know, pastors who cheat. I think about, you know, the proverbial, you know, secretary, you know, the boss and the secretary, or, excuse me. I think we have wayward hearts.
Yeah.
That's the issue. And when we are lacking connection, we will try to find connection in all sorts of places, and oftentimes in places that aren't helpful. So I look at it like, are Christians hypocrites? Yep. Right along with everybody else.
For sure.
So it's like, you know, when people say, well, you know, you're supposed to be this and you're supposed to be like that, I say, well, yeah, those are the principles that guide my life. I really am working hard at trying to represent Christ that way, but I'm also not there yet.
It's like, I feel like people go, oh, well, you're Christian so that you think you're better. I'm like, no, I'm trying to be better. Does not mean I am or think I am.
Right.
It means that I'm trying to be on a path that I'm trying to, like a sculptor, of like a marble,
Right.
like it's just rough marble. I'm trying to get the bad parts out
Right.
and polish it, and it is not quick work. It's
Right.
not quick work, man. And sometimes when you're chiseling marble, you break your hands, you're
Yep.
bleeding. You're like, it's not a clean process, and
No.
it's not a overnight process. Michelangelo didn't build a David in a day.
Right.
Like, he slowly, lifted. If you know how he made a model, and he put it in water, and then he just kind of slowly took the head out of the water, and then that's where he started, so that he didn't overwhelm himself with the whole thing. And for me, like Christian, I'm trying to slowly fix all the parts and try to follow Christ's path, and I don't feel like that's some overnight thing.
No.
And that I'm great now. I'm a Christian, like, no.
Well,
I'm still terrible.
Yeah,
I'm working on not being terrible, but I'm still not there.
And
I don't think it's ending.
it has to be. I really believe it has to be. I'm learning how to be loved, and that's it. And so I'm not good at it, and I'm not good at allowing that love that God has for me to change and mold me. So otherwise, it becomes legalism in my mind where it's like, oh, I should be better, I should do that, and it's like I really I get as far away from that kind of thinking as I can, because that produces a lot of shame and a lot of guilt, and I don't see that as being the dominant thing. So in the same way that I know my wife differently, we just celebrated 24 years.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So the person that I knew when I married her is not the same person that I know now.
No.
And I think of my relationship with Jesus that way. It's like the way that I knew Jesus when I first started is not the way that I know him now. But
he's still the same.
Well, he doesn't change.
Yeah.
My understanding of who he is
okay.
and how he functions is it blossoms and it grows, and it's more beautiful and more mysterious and more majestic and more intimate and more, than I could have ever dreamt. And so the way that I look at that is that this is a process of allowing the love of God to change and shape me. And the more that I can participate in that process, the more I'll look like Jesus. And that's the thing. And so when somebody says, if people, actually nobody's really said this to me for a long time. Maybe it's because I'm not running in the right circles anymore. But if somebody says, well, you think you're better than other people, I would ask them, what makes you say that? Because I'm actually pursuing a man who was murdered, and I'm trying to learn what it means to embody him in such a way that the deep humility that Christ displayed as part of me. And so what is it you're seeing in me that would make you say that? I would want to know, because I'm thinking, man, I'm missing the mark if somebody says that. Generally it's a throwaway statement, and Christians are, and it's like, well, help me get this better. Yeah, because
I feel like sometimes people are afraid to, I don't even know if afraid is the right word, to try to understand Christian or join Christianity, because it's like, I'm not perfect, I can't be a Christian. I'm like, no, it's the opposite. It's knowing that you're not perfect is more important. Knowing that you suck is more important, and that everyone in that building that they call a church sucks. They're no different. They just realize that they need Christ, or they're trying to understand what that means. It doesn't mean that you're perfect, and sometimes I don't know that they're saying, oh, you think you're better. They're afraid that they would have to be instantly this thing, you know. I'm like, it's not. It's a process.
Yeah.
To me, it's a process.
So
and
if
you know, even when when Jesus with all the disciples, like, they failed a ton of times, man. Like, they're hanging out with the guy. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes I wonder, like, oh, what if, you know, I train jiu-jitsu, you train jiu-jitsu, you've met Kyle Terra, you roll with Kyle Terra, you sold that one time, and I wondered one time, man, if I met Kyle in the beginning, although I've trained jiu-jitsu longer than Kyle, so I guess that wouldn't work, but if I train with him every day, if I was around Kyle every day, how much would I be better, you know, at jiu-jitsu? And I would assume a lot. But then I look at, again, I would have to make the choice to be better. And I'd have to follow the things he tells me to do. And I'm not trying to say Kyle is Christ. No. Not even close to that. No. Right. But what I'm saying is, like, the disciples hung out with the dude every day. Right. And they made a ton of mistakes, you know? Right. They pretended they didn't even, at one point, they said, I don't know the guy. You know, like.
Don't even know if I get what you're doing.
Yeah, and they were always asking questions, and he would seem frustrated with them, you know? And so I think people don't understand that part of Christianity that are on the outside of Christianity sometimes. Yeah. So sometimes when I'm sharing with people, I just want them to understand, like, no, man, like, it's a process. Right. And no one's ever said, oh, Mike, you think you're better. And hopefully I'm not putting that out that I think I'm better, because I don't think that. But I want to express that it's trying to be better. It's not you are better. Yeah. And that's the process. One of the things I wanted to ask you today is that I'm struggling with is which is like the basic tenet of Christianity is forgiveness. And I thought I understood forgiveness, and I thought it was as simple as, like, I forgive you, and then that's it. But finding that even when I think and pray about forgiving someone that I perceive that they harmed me in some way, something will come up, and then it reminds me of it, and I get all fired up again. Right. And not necessarily that I'm like, I hate them or like, this, but I'm getting upset, re-upset, like reopening wounds. And I always thought that, like, you know, forgiveness is part of the process of healing, and you know, and obviously, you know, Jesus forgave the entire world and history's sins, but we're supposed to forgive. And man, again, it's weird to me that I thought I knew that, and I've been a Christian a very long time, and this tended, again, like, I feel like a pillar of the largest pillar of Christianity, forgiveness, that I feel like I suck so bad at, and I thought I was good at it, but then I've been realizing recently, again, something will come up that reminds you of somebody, you know. So, like, the other day, someone brought up this person that, like, that was in my school and was causing some trouble, and they're gone, and I forgot about them, and I thought I let it go and got rid of it and wasn't carrying it anymore. And then someone brought up the name, and it just, like, got me all fired up again. I'm like, why do? And for me, it's like, this person isn't currently a part of my life or my school's life, and they're not affecting me in any way. Right. But they just are. The name, it's like affecting in here though, or in here, or whatever you want to call it. And man, it's really been bothering me lately, like, that I don't understand. I don't think I fully understand what it means to forgive, and in biblically, it's not a lot of explanation of forgiving, I don't feel like. And maybe there's some scripture you can throw at me that I can start trying to look at better and analyze a little bit better and try to understand it, or commentators on this that I can probably look at, because I feel like that's what I'm missing. Maybe some better theologians that can, like, help me with this a little bit, because I feel like I'm failing pretty bad right now at this. And again, I feel like it's something that I should have had a little bit easier. And I'm not even talking about, like, hard stuff, like someone murdering my child and forgiving. That's like
Right.
I can't even
Conceive of that. Right.
It's hard to conceive of that, or someone, hurting my family, or whatever. I'm talking about little petty, stupid things, and I'm like, I suck so bad. Why am I upset about this dumb thing?
So
and I can at least, I feel like I'm on the right path because I can recognize that it's stupid.
That's important.
But it's still bothering me,
Right. Right. So there's a lot to what you've had to say. So
I talk a lot.
No, it's okay. So there's the concept of forgiveness. Then there's the process of forgiveness, which you've alluded to, that Christianity is a process. And then there's like really practical steps to forgiveness. So there's not just one. It's a very layered issue. And there's managing your emotions. There's managing your thoughts. There's a lot of things. But let me start with this. The Lord's Prayer says, "Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us." Right. So right away, there's an expectation that this is part of the deal. The disciples ask, how are we supposed to do this? And Jesus is like 70 times 7. In other words, always.
Yeah.
So you go, okay, how am I always supposed to forgive somebody? So what are some of the things that go along with that? And I could go into, Jesus' model forgiveness. Okay, so the way that I approach this is that I say, okay, I've been wounded. Okay, I think of it like a wound. Somebody's hurt my feelings. Somebody's done something, whatever. It's painful. And I go, okay, so do I go back to them and ask them to fix my wound? Can I or can I not? Well, I don't know. Depends upon the relationship. So most of the time, no. So I go, okay, well, who do I know who is a physician who might be able to assist me in my wounding? And I go, oh, this guy named Jesus. Okay, so I take myself to him and I say, my heart hurts. This person did this to me and I can't seem to...
Through prayer.
Oh, yeah. Well, talking to Christ. Yeah. So I'm like, man, I'm in pain. Jesus, help me. And I just say, hey, this hurt my feelings, or maybe my pride, or I try to identify clearly what it is that happened. And then what I do is I try to say, okay, this issue is still there. When I think about this person, my lizard brain, my amygdala gets activated, and I just go just go right to primitive brain, right? Yeah. And you go, okay, so that gets activated as soon as I do that. Well, it's a threat response, right? It's like, oh, I feel threat. Okay, so then what I do is I go, okay, Jesus, when I think about this person, this is what happens. So I'm not caring well for this person because you told me to love my enemies, and I'm not doing a good job. So I literally, in prayer, will take that person's hand and I will join it to Jesus' hand. And I will say, I need you to care for this person because I'm terrible at it. Right? And what that says to me is that I can't carry this burden. I'm not good at carrying this burden, and I wasn't designed to carry this burden. You know how to care for this person really well. So that then when I think about it again, and maybe it's 1,000 times the next day or even the next moment, I learn to say, thank you, Jesus, for caring for them so well. Thank you that I don't have to carry that burden because I know you love them and I know that you're going to love them really well. Thank you for taking care of that. So I divide my need to carry that and I take it to Jesus because he said, come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So I go, okay, I'm going to unburden myself with this person to Jesus. And then I will say, okay, let's say they've injured my pride or whatever it is. And I'll say, Lord, you need to teach me what it looks like to be loved in this area. You need to teach me what's true about me in this area. So if somebody's, said something that's not flattering, there could be any number of things, then I could say, could you show me what it looks like to be loved? Could you show me what it looks like to be accepted, or whatever is the thing that's been triggered, right? Mm-hmm. So what is the fear behind the anger is the question that I try to ask. And then I try to bring that to Christ and ask him to show me what that looks like. So I handle it at the foot of the cross that way. Okay? So that's one part of the forgiveness kind of matrix, right? I go, okay, let's frame this up. Let's make sure that you're here. So then, as I'm going through my day, and I think about what's happened to me, I don't feel defenseless because I know the lover of my soul, and I know that he's tending to me, and he's tending to that person, right? And the more that I pray for that person, and the more that I give praise and thanks to Jesus for caring for them, the more my burden is lightened, and the better frame of reference I have. Because that person is loved deeply by Jesus. So Jesus would have them on his lap, and he would be saying, hey, this is my little boy. I'm so in love with him. You're so precious to me. Now, I don't have that perspective of them, but I know he does. So I can ask him to teach me how to think about that person that way. So when that situation or that person comes up, I go through that process. Thank you, Jesus, for caring for them. Thank you for loving them. Thank you that you know them. Thank you that you know me, right? So I create a little bit of space, and I learn to have a little empathy for what's happened, right? And then I can say, thank you for caring for me, because I'm not defenseless, right? So then what happens is that if, and like I said, I mean, I'll maybe have to do that 1,000 times in a day. I mean, this is a process of forgiveness. And then what I'll try to do is, and this is assuming that I am not able to have any kind of restoration with the person. Mm-hmm. So that's the assumption. Yeah. So then what I'll do is, if I wind up being kind of, triggered, if my alligator brain kicks in, then I'll stop and I'll say, Lord, I'm feeling pretty angry, or I'm upset. Can you show me what this is about? And anger is always a secondary emotion. So what's behind my anger? Well, fear or pain or something. Okay, well, what is it so what you try to do is, and instead of everything being kind of mashed together, you pull that stuff apart and you go, oh, that's what this is, mm-hmm. and that's what this is, and that's what makes this sense. Is. So you have a much better scope of what's happened, right? And when you get different perspective on the pain that somebody's caused you, you can think about the pain you've caused other people. You can think about the way that Christ has chosen to be merciful to you. You can get different perspectives that are helpful. And sometimes, one day one perspective is helpful. Some days another perspective is helpful. The other day the next, you know what I mean? Like, so I try to have a host of ways to view it, so that if one perspective runs dry, I can go, yeah, but then there's this over here too, So I put all of that in my toolbox, and I say, okay, now if I'm going to talk about forgiveness, then I know that this is a long process, and it's a long road, and it doesn't happen overnight, and I can't expect to just quote unquote feel better. But what I can do is I can learn how to manage that trigger for me. So if something happens and I remember that person and I go from a 0 to a 10, then I'm praying and I'm like, okay, God, help me to go from 0 to 8, or 0 to 6 or 0 to 4, or a 2. But the idea is that you have an untreated wound. And when something hits that wound, then you react like a dog that, mm-hmm. Just snarl and, and it's like, okay, so what are you doing about treating that wound? And if you're not actually taking that wound to Christ, it's never going to go away. It'll never get better. Or if you just simply cover it up, which is what most people do, forget about it, don't talk about it.
Yep.
It's like, well,
I think that's what I've been doing. I'm like,
it's gonna fester.
I'll just say the words, I forgive them, and then I just move on. I'll just move on, and it
doesn't work.
It's not working.
So imagine having a snapped femur, and saying, I'm just gonna move on.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, go ahead. You're gonna bleed a quart of blood in there right away, and you're gonna walk really bad. But that's not gonna get better.
Yeah.
The only way it gets better is by taking it to the great physician. And so I take Jesus at his word. I mean, I literally, my faith looks so much like, it's grappling. This is Jacob. I limp. I limp because I don't know another way than to take Jesus really seriously when he says, come to me. So I will come to him and I'll say, man, I got to have your help. And we're going to grapple. You're going to beat me. You're going to touch my hip. I'm going to limp, and that's okay with me. I don't know another way to do this, right? So I'm very practical when it comes to when Jesus says something. I just go, okay, how do I actually practically practice that? So does that make sense?
Yeah. No, all of it made sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So because what happens is if you're just,
I've been trying to break down why is it upsetting me, and then I've been trying to go kind of that psychological route, I guess.
Right.
Is like, well, is it like an insecurity of mine? Is it like
sure.
a pride, or what?
It's always
what is
a cocktail, man.
What is upsetting me? Like, why is it upsetting it? Because I know logically that it doesn't have a real reason.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no tangible. Because, like I said, this person or these people are having zero effect on anything I'm doing, other than my thought processes.
Right.
But like in this space out here, the 3-dimensional space, not the internal space. The internal space is where things are going on. It's really not affecting anything. Even the choices I'm making are not really affected by them.
Right.
And I think when someone does something, I try to go, okay, I don't want that to happen. How can I prevent something like that to happen? Sometimes that's on me. Like, what can I do that won't make them do that, and
but it's so life. Okay, so you think about it this way, if and we'll use the jiu-jitsu analogy, right? You want to prevent things from happening on the mat, right? And you think, well, I can do this, this, and this, and this, and you can build kind of a long list of things that you can do, so that by the time something bad happens, several bad things have happened that have led to that, right?
Yes.
And you want to protect yourself, right? Yeah, and you want to protect yourself. And on one hand, I would say that's a really important skill to know. On the other hand, it, in a metaphorical sense, it keeps you from loving people really well.
This is true. You put a little bit. Sometimes you put barriers up versus allowing them to get close.
I'm so afraid of getting hurt.
Yep.
And that's really honestly how most people live. Is that they're just really afraid of being hurt.
For sure.
So it's like I got a lot of safety nets up. And the way that I think about it is, if you know a really good doctor, then you're not so worried about getting hurt.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
So if we know a really good doctor and we've been able to go to him, we can trust him a little bit more. We can learn what it means to be loved the way that he wants to love us. Obviously, we're not stupid. The scriptures teach us to be, the scriptures teach us, be wise as serpent, but meek as dove, So I can be as wise as serpent, but I'm going to be meek. I want to love like Jesus did. I really want to be reckless with that. I don't want it to be so guarded. And I know that that's what God has for people who hurt me. And if I can somehow release them from my own kind of like jail, then I think I'm more free to love other people, and even them, given the opportunity. It's a process. It's a process. And the fact that God has brought this stuff up for you, all it is him saying, hey, I just want you to work on this. That's all it is. It's not you idiot. You know, it's more just like, oh, hey, you've just got more work to do in this area.
No, I just feel like I'm more disappointed myself. Not that like I don't feel like Jesus is like.
No, but there's even
I think
that.
he
Mike,
knows, like, so I
Yeah.
don't feel like it's something I need to.
So you should agree with him about that, Mike.
Yeah.
Is he disappointed with you?
I mean,
No.
I think he just knows, like, well, that's you.
Right. Is he disappointed with you?
I mean, a little bit probably, because
No.
you're still falling short of the glory of God. So
Wait. What is his disposition towards you and towards me?
love, it's like
Right.
your child, but I could be disappointed in my children. I still love them.
Okay. So let me
You know
ask
what I mean?
you
Like,
this.
there's times where I had an expectation of what I think that my child should behave a certain way.
Right.
You're never going to change the fact that I love them unconditionally.
Right.
And when they make mistakes, I'm still going to love them. And
Right.
I'm going to forgive them for making mistakes.
Right.
But I do want to see a change. And I am disappointed when I don't see the change, for sure.
Sure.
So I guess that's kind of how I see it from Christ. Not that he's, it's more like a father's disappointment is the way that I feel it. You're like, no.
Please don't go there.
No.
I'm just like, why?
No.
No, because if you think about it, then we're always just disappointing Jesus.
Yeah.
I cannot see that.
I guess no, not always, but
Oh man, you tell me one way that you have actually measured up to what his
Okay,
quote unquote expectation might be.
the Sermon on the Mount is very difficult.
Come on, so the way that I look
Very
at this,
difficult.
I mean, I can't even.
That's
so
a hard.
If God's great disposition towards his people is just disappointment, then I'm going to become a Buddhist.
Life is pain, the Buddhist way.
I'll just go somewhere else. I'm like, this sucks. But if God's disposition towards us, which I think is shown in the scriptures, is mercy and grace and love and forgiveness,
Well, I believe this. I believe this too.
then it's for you when you realize that you are not where you would want to be. And that, I think, is one of the most important keys, and that's part of where I got to in the book, actually, was that Christians have to bask in the love and the grace and the mercy of God. And we don't, and we're not good at it. So we get on the expectation wheel, and I should be better, I want to be better, I should be better, and it's like, wait, I don't see Jesus saying, get better. I don't see it. I see him saying, let me love you. Let me show you what it means to be loved, right? That's what I see. So you may have had an expectation of yourself that you would somehow be better. And you're a jujitsu black belt.
Mm-hmm.
So the irony for me is considerable. Does somebody get on the mat and go, I shouldn't have fallen for that? And you go, you've only been doing it for 4 years.
I say that exact conversation all the time, actually.
So how can that not be true of you in Christ, Mike?
This is true, yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So you have grace for somebody who's practicing jujitsu.
Yeah, I try to explain them like, well, I've been doing this well.
So
and it would be crazy if this
that,
didn't happen that way that you thought it was going to happen.
Take that to you and Christ.
Yep.
It's
a good analogy. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Well, let's. I don't want to keep you because you got to be at a place soon.
I do.
Yeah, and it's a little bit of drive.
Yep.
I appreciate you coming down, and this is an excellent conversation.
That's so fun.
I got a lot out of it, and maybe if I have more questions, I'll bring you back, or you write another book, and then I just bring you back out.
That's great.
So you got about a month to finish your next book, and then you can start writing
I'll
furiously.
just see what I can do.
Furiously writing. You need to be like Churchill, and then just have someone dictate everything.
That's what
he
I
never
should
wrote
do.
anything.
Right.
And he wrote a lot of books, but didn't write.
I'll just
any
have
books.
somebody follow me around.
Someone follow you all day long.
Yeah.
Just talk to him. Hey, this is my idea.
I'll figure out how I can pull that one off.
All right. Well, that's it. Peace.
Thanks.
Thank you for coming out, Bob.
Thanks for having me.
It. One more thing, is there what's the website? Do you have a website too?
Yeah, just bobfabey.com.
.com. Yeah. So if you have any information for him, I'm assuming you do you preach at other places
I
sometimes?
do.
Yeah, so like if you're looking for a great preacher and with really good ideas and good articulation. I mean, you just heard him talk for an hour, no problem. So message him and check out his book. Again, it was awesome. The cover, we didn't even get into the cover. I'm sure a lot of people ask you about the cover, but it's so awesome.
Yeah.
It's such an awesome cover. That would be a good t-shirt, honestly. But check him out. Thanks.
Let me talk for just a second, help me feel that sense of rhythm. Find the meanings in our bearings and discover this position as a stage along the way. Another rung to the ladder, either stalling or you're climbing, and I'd rather be the latter. Instead of getting fatter, let the footsteps resume. Naturally, we gradually might stretch out of tune.